Good morning, everybody. It is Tuesday, week 2 of my furlough, and that's a great day. Everything's going very well. I am doing all I can to keep busy and continue to do projects on my own. And today I got kind of a neat one, I think. It should be kind of fun. Let's see here. One of the things I've been trying to do is clean up the house a little bit. And I do not consider myself a hoarder, but I am certainly a saver. I tend to just think that's important, so I save it. And for the last couple of decades, and I have moved twice from different states, and these things have been moved with me, which is ridiculous. But I have got tax returns and all the tax information from a long time ago. So I started getting rid of some of that stuff and disposing of, destroying all the stuff that had social security numbers on it and just pitching the nonsensical stuff. But in the process of all of that clean out and getting rid of stuff, I found some sort of cool things. And one of those things were some shots that I did probably early 1990s. And I have got where I drew out how I was going to light it and how I was going to, what it was going to look like. And then on the back of some of these pages that I have got, and you can see how they're like, these were actually in a box under my house. The moisture was getting to them. You can see how they're sticking together. I stuck the Polaroids, because this was all originally shot on film, 4x5 sheet film. Stock images, but I stuck the Polaroids to a lot of these. And as I was looking at these things, I thought it'd be kind of fun to maybe reshoot these and talk about the difference between what I did back then on film and what I'm going to do today digitally to recreate these same images, and maybe put a little bit of a spin on it, take them a step farther. But you can see how, I don't know if you can see that. See how I drew out everything. And then actually this one right here, just a light bulb on a black background. Well, there's the Polaroid to it. You can see it's all got paper stuck to it. And I actually found the piece of film. That's gonna be difficult to see. Let's see if we can, that's a little bit better. But you can see the original sheet of film. And back in the stock days when we were doing film, you had to put a little sticker with your name and the date, and it had a description on it and stuff like that. But I'm going to reshoot one of these today because I thought it'd be kind of fun. And the one I'm going to reshoot, I could not find the color sheet of film for it, and I cannot find my little drawing as to how I was going to light it and everything, but I found 3 Polaroids. Okay. And it's a key and an antique doorknob, floating, mountain range, and kind of a sunset. And let's see. You can kind of see the progression. There's Polaroid number 1. Here's Polaroid number 2. I think I probably got the sunset looking a little bit better. And then this is probably a final Polaroid. Maybe. I'm not sure. It's probably pretty close. But we're going to recreate this. I'll show you kind of how I did this when I shot it on film. It was far more complex shot then than it's going to be today, because we can shoot everything separately today, piece it together in Photoshop, and probably do it even better than what we did here. Okay, let me start by showing you this. Believe it or not, I've got a box full of props and items that I use every so often, and in there was the original doorknob and the original plate. This thing goes in like this. I think I had to put a screw in the back to hold it together, so I'll have to find a screw to do that because I don't have that. These were originally bought at an antique store in Denver, Colorado on Broadway. I'm assuming it's still there to this day, but back when I was working there was this section of Broadway that was just antique store after antique store. And if you wanted furniture or hardware or props, we went there all the time to find different things. And that's where I got these. And then I've got the key as well. So I've had those all these years. So I've got the original props. And the interesting thing, this is the first challenge when I was shooting it on film, is how to hang, keep in mind, everything had to be shot in one take. So in order to suspend these things, what I did was use dowel rods. And I think at the time I had steel dowel rods so that they wouldn't bend. Wood dowel rods have a lot of ability to flex. So you would somehow create a clamp on one end to hold this, super glue or somehow glue that to the end of the dowel rod, and it would just suspend in space. The tricky part to that was whatever perspective your camera was shooting at, this dowel rod had to go straight away from the subject, straight into your background or whatever's holding it, and be hidden so that you could not, you weren't seeing the bottom of the pole or the dowel rod. It would just run straight off and be invisible. You wouldn't see it because there was no retouching it out later. It needed to be concealed by the subject itself. And now, when all you have is this little tiny key, that was a challenge. And I'm pretty sure that this little section of the key, let's take this out. I'm pretty sure that that little section of the key right there is where the dowel rod was coming out and being hidden. So it probably took me hours just to get all that coordinated. Whereas today, I will shoot all these things individually, light them perfectly, and then cut them out and piece them together in Photoshop later. Going to be a huge, huge advantage today. The other thing that was a challenge when I shot this on film was to get that gradated background. Now, it doesn't look like much in this Polaroid, and I really wish I could have found the color version of this. But the way that I did that, and if I remember correctly, it's going to go from kind of an amber to a purple to a blue maybe, and it gradates off. And the way I accomplished that back then, and this is not perfect, but I took kind of a box, say like this. Now this box has got a pattern inside. I would have had a box that was probably either white or probably black on the inside. And what I did was I just took the box like this, cut a hole out of the back. Once I cut the hole out of the back, I was able to put my light on the back of it. That light would shine through the hole into the box, and then I would take gels and put them over the box. And I would layer those gels kind of one over another like this, and I think I maybe had a blue one on top, and I create these colors on the front of that box that I could then project to the background to create that gradient and make it look like a sunset. In front of the box, projecting that gradient onto the background, is a mountain range that I've simply cut out of black cardboard probably. So I've got this ridge, this cut out mountain range sitting in front of it to create a silhouette. But let me show you kind of in a diagram how that all worked, and maybe it'll make a little bit more sense. Okay, so here I've drawn it out kind of just to give a visual, and I'm kind of looking overhead here. So I had a black seamless background, just a black piece of paper. Here's the box with the gels pointing up and back at the black background to create the gradation. Here's the mountain silhouette cutout. It's sitting in front of that box to hide that. And then somehow, I can't remember how I had these dowel rods attached to something. I don't know if they went through this cardboard cutout. I can't remember how I did that, but somehow the dowel rods are sticking out. There's the dowel rods. Super glued or hot glued maybe to the key and the doorknob. And then of course the camera's out here looking back at the entire thing. Everything that shouldn't be seen is hidden. Shot it on 4x5 film, probably with a 210mm lens. Setting all this up was probably the biggest part of this particular shoot. Today I think the Photoshop part of it will probably be more extensive than the shooting part. And a little side note too, I probably shot this in my parents' garage. I used to use their garage as a studio. Okay, so now that we kind of laid out how we did it on film, let's do it digitally. Like I said, I think it's going to be a whole lot easier because we're going to shoot these items separately, cut them out, piece it all together in Photoshop, probably create the background completely from scratch in Photoshop. Okay, this I think is kind of funny. This piece of the doorknob slides through here, and there's actually threads inside the doorknob that if you had a bolt, you could put through the back and hold it all there together. I don't have a bolt the right size. I don't know where I would have put the bolt that I originally used. So what I'm going to do is go back to the dowel rods, cut a little piece. There is a screw right here in the edge. Tighten this dowel rod into the doorknob itself, put through the back, and then I'm going to use a clamp, hold it there in place, and voila. Again, don't have to hide anything anymore because I'm just going to cut it out in Photoshop. And then I've got the screws that would go into here. I'll just take a little bit of tape. Make sure the screw is sitting in there correctly, and piece number 1 is ready to photograph. One of the things that I'm noticing with this brass or whatever it is, it's a little tarnished now from age, and trying to polish it up, it looks okay, but it doesn't look as pristine. And I haven't taken the time to polish it. So we may have to do some retouching based on fingerprints or just ugliness. Okay, so here's the setup at the moment. Medium-sized softbox over here to the left. Doorknob set up on the white seamless and propped in the back. And one little side note, when it comes to lighting products, when lighting anything really, but certainly in product photography, I don't think about the light that I'm shining on the object as much as I think about the light that I'm reflecting into the surface of the product. Now the highlights that you see on there are what are known as specular highlights, and a specular highlight is simply defined as a direct reflection of the light source. So if I want this piece of metal to have this nice even highlight all the way across it, I need to have a big enough light source to create that reflection, not shine on it as much as just what is going to reflect into it. So if I had a very tiny little light source, it's going to create a tiny little reflection, and the specular highlight would then be different. So I've created this big enough softbox to cover that. The highlight goes from the bottom all the way to the top. That's our main light source. I'm probably going to put a fill card on the other side. Again, a big white board that's going to create, let me see here, it's going to create a nice highlight all along here. In other words, it's going to create another reflection on that side and give it a little bit of dimension. Okay, so I've added the fill card over here, and let me show you what it's doing. If you look along this edge, right along here, I will take the fill card out and you'll see that nice highlight just disappear. See how it went dark? I'll bring it back in. We basically just created a reflection of a fill card on that side, and it gives some simple shape and dimension. Okay, 2 more comparisons to film and digital. I am a big believer that one of the things that needs to remain the same with our digital photography, as was true with our film photography, is to get as much of it correct in camera as possible. I'm a big fan of Photoshop, but I do not think that Photoshop should be a tool that we use to justify fixing something later because we didn't do it right in the camera. So we're going to try to get this as perfect as we can with as little Photoshop help as far as using it as a crutch as we can. One thing that's a pretty big change, I sold my handheld meter years ago. So as far as calculating the exposure in the film days, you wanted to get that right because you were shooting Polaroids, and those Polaroids cost money. And so every time you shot a Polaroid, you were spending a couple, $2 or $3. And that would get expensive if you shot a lot of Polaroids without getting the exposure correct. Now, I can shoot as many as I want. It doesn't cost me anything. But because I don't have a handheld meter anymore, we're going to have to guess at the exposure. I think there's 600 watt seconds coming out of this one light. So I'm going to guess f16. Try it again. Well, clearly my guess at f16 is way off. Let's go to f32 and see how that works. Okay, so much better. I'm gonna shoot this, make sure everything's exactly how I want it. I'm gonna then put the key in, photograph the key separately, and then we'll bring it all into the computer and start piecing the whole thing together. Okay, so one of the things when I go to the key is I wanna leave the lighting exactly the same. I wanna do the angle exactly the same, because if they start becoming different and I piece it together, it's not gonna look right. So I'm gonna get this to sit in there as perfectly as I can, but I'm not gonna change any of the lighting. Camera angle will stay basically the same. Okay, so there's my two shots in Bridge. We'll bring them into Photoshop, process them, cut them out, and start assembling the entire finished project. Actually shooting them, once I got the light set up, probably took me 30 minutes, I'm gonna guess, something like that. I'm sure back in the day, in the film days, that whole setup and shooting time probably took hours. So considerably different. All right, guys, I think I'm finished. Like I said, I cut the key and the doorknob and the plate out, cut it off the white background that we shot it on. Let me show you in layers here. First layer I did was simply a gradation. The amber, the purple into the dark blue. And if you go into the gradient tool, it's pretty simple. You can just come over here like this. Let me see, which one did I do? I think I did this one, and then I just created my own colors in here by clicking what you want it to be. Doesn't look like I saved it, so. But anyway, created my gradient, took my mountain range and just filled it in with black. Then took the two subject matters that we put in there, and voila, created just exactly what I probably did 20, 30 years ago. And I think it turned out pretty good. The nice thing was I could, size them a little easier. I wasn't as bound to them sitting there floating on dowel rods and not being able to change that around. So it was a whole lot easier to put it together in Photoshop. But I wanted to do one step further simply because I can. Photoshop made this image and this shoot so much easier than it was on film. I had to do a couple of things, and so I went out and found some brushes, added a little bit better sky, and then I needed a little bit more detail in the mountains, just because I thought they go dark and the whole bottom third of the image is fairly dark as far as the background. So I gave the mountains a little bit of detail, and there you go, the 2020 version of an image that took place back in 1990 probably. And there's the finished product. So there you have it. So I hope you guys enjoyed that as much as I did. I had a really good time with that. I've never tried to replicate something I shot way back when in the film days. So that was a good time. And I think I'm going to do some more of these because I have more that I found in the pile. I actually came up with an idea that we're going to challenge some of my OIP&T friends from way back when, because I found an image from those days, and we'll make it maybe a coronavirus challenge. And so be watching for that next. Hope you guys are doing well. Stay safe, subscribe, comment. I appreciate you watching as always, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, guys.